I'd like to believe that a lot of us have painted this model over the years. And today, I'm not just going to be adding to my collection of these, but I'm going to be painting it probably in what's going to feel like the most backwards way possible. And in the end, I'm pretty pleased with the results.
Now, at some point in time, most of us have probably painted this exact Stormcast Eternal. I myself have painted several of them. I use them as a really great way of experimenting with new techniques because the model stays relatively consistent and I can compare them to each other and get a pretty good understanding of whether or not I've got a good mastery of that new skill or not. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with this sprue, this is the Stormcast Eternal Learn to Paint little freebie that they hand out to stores, whether it be an official store or your local friendly game store. These models are the ones that they're going to be handing out. Or they'll be handing out the 40K equivalent, which is a generic Space Marine. These models are really great for just testing out new things, and they're really easy to put together and they're a lot of fun. And I'd wager that for a lot of you, this has probably been your first experience with Warhammer, whether it be the Age of Sigmar one, like I've said, or the 40K one. I have done a lot of weird and interesting things with this over the years, and today I want to take some inspiration from another content creator. Now, if you were on TikTok during lockdowns, you may be familiar with a content creator by the name of Ground Affected. I believe that is how you say his username. And he painted the 40K one of these on the sprue. And although that raised a lot of controversy on his channel for some reason, I just can't get it out of my head. I really like the idea for some reason, and it seems like a fun little challenge to do. And the more that I've gotten into this, the more I've started to scratch my head on what gets paint, what gets left the bare plastic. Do I paint the inside of the model? How much of the inside of the model do I paint? And do I decorate the base as if it's going to be a finished product, how I would do with all of my other miniatures? There's a lot of very interesting questions that I have to answer for myself. And starting as of right now, with no progress yet so far, I think I'm just going to answer them as I come across them. Let's just have some fun. As I begin laying down my base coats, I'm kind of taking inspiration from a lot of the other Stormcasts that I've done in the past and trying to decide on where paint is going to inevitably end up and what is going to stay bare plastic. And although some of these decisions are proving to be a little bit interesting as the shapes don't really look like what they're meant to. For example, one of the calves tends to be a little disformed, but you don't notice that once the model is assembled. I am also coming to the conclusion of how much of a wash and highlight do I want to do on this model? How in depth do I want to be? And if I'm going to start adding contrast in shadows, do I do it in the orientation that the model sits within the sprue, or do I add it as if it were assembled? Honestly, I'm not sure I really want to take it that far, but I do want to hint at some of that in some way by adding some shadows in some places and just leaving it a generic wash with a highlight in others. I think this is the best case going forward for adding a nice splash of detail without going super overboard and making this final result feel kind of cluttered. Okay, so I've got my base coat probably about 75% of the way done here, and it's time to start adding washes and highlights as I finish off some of the random details. And I really like how the whole thing is shaping up. I think this is going to look pretty interesting when it's all said and done. I really wish that I had more of a story to go along with this, but sometimes it's just fun to sit down and try something weird and new. And I'm having a lot of fun doing this. I don't think I will do this again, and I'm not sure that I'll be doing this with any other models unless that's something you guys really want to see. But I probably won't be doing it on anything big. It'll be a single character sprue like this if I do it again. Now, one thing I want to head off at the pass is there's a lot of people out there who kind of live by pre-painting on the sprue and then cutting the model off, assembling it, and then doing touch-ups where the sprue was originally connecting to the model. Some people seem to think that this saves you time. Some people seem to feel as though it gives you a much better handle to hold onto the model when manipulating it to paint it. And if you're one of those people, I'm not going to say you're wrong because it's clearly working for you. However, every time that I have ever experienced that, whether it be I have purchased a model from eBay and it has arrived partially painted on the sprue, or I have quote-unquote rescued a miniature that's been given to me that's been painted in that way, it's pretty obvious that it's been painted in that way. It's very difficult to put those patches on over the spots where the sprues have been cut off and color match, especially if you're trying to do a lot of detail work. Now, like I said, it's just my opinion. I personally don't enjoy the idea of painting on the sprue and then trying to cut it off. But in this case, I'm not planning to remove it from the sprue. I'm going to leave it as is, as if it's a framed piece of art. I think it'll be kind of fun to have sitting on the desk or in my display case behind me.
As I began laying down the highlights, I realized very quickly that this was the point where I was going to have to make the conscious decision of how far was I going to wrap certain details around the edge of the model. Ultimately, I ended up coming up to the decision that as I was painting, I would only paint the areas that could be seen if the model was fully assembled. And so I was able to determine that by looking at some of the other models that I'd already put together that are of the same sculpt. And ultimately, I am pretty happy with the final result. That all said, though, there were some interesting decisions that had to get made because, well, although I couldn't see certain details when the model was fully assembled, I could see some details when the model was on the sprue. So there were some things that I was painting that I didn't realize was actually a part of the sculpt. And it's now made me wonder, how often have I missed these details when painting my other Stormcasts? And I've gone back through and looked at quite a few of them, and I've painted them on some and not on others. So this was a pretty eye-opening experience and made me realize that when I sit down to work on a model, I should probably make more mental notes about little details here and there that I'm finding along the way so that things don't get missed when it's time to paint.
As I'm approaching the end of this project, I am pleasantly surprised at how easy it is to manipulate the model and to hold it in a way where I'm not constantly rubbing the model with my hands, which can sometimes happen purely by accident when using a painting handle. Your hands end up in a weird spot and you don't realize it, and then you flip the model over and you've rubbed something off. But also I am kind of blown away by how awkward it has been to get the brush into some places. I assumed with leaving everything on the sprue that there would still be plenty of space to get brushes in and out, and I've been kind of impressed at how small of a brush I've had to use at times in order to get into something that I don't normally consider a detail when I'm painting the model fully assembled, because it's pretty easy to get the brush in there. But the sprue has been a little more tricky than I would have thought.
And here we have it. Now, could I have taken the highlights to a bit more of an extreme and wet blended things together and done a lot more with the wood grain effect that I've done before on the back of the shield? Absolutely. But this felt like a good, almost call it love letter to Games Workshop box art meets ground effected's, well, video that he put out for his own channel. I think this was a really neat thing to do. I'm glad I did it. Again, I don't think I'll be doing another one, but man, I really love how this turned out, and I hope you guys think it's pretty cool, and I hope it inspires you guys to do something fun and weird, even if it's just for you. In any case, thanks so much for watching, and as always, may your display case always be filled and your pile of shame never run empty. Until next time.